Hello everyone, welcome to this video on Introduction to Demand Forecasting. So before we go to demand forecasting, let's dig into this term forecasting. All of us have looked into some kind of forecast in order to plan our activities in better manner. For instance, you guys look into weather so that I can prepare before I go out with proper clothes and so on, right? So forecasting plays a very important role when it comes to planning the resources for a given activity or a task. So in this context, when we talk about demand forecasting, so demand forecasting represents a set of tools that allows business professionals or demand planners to plan better for the future events. So for instance, by knowing what is the sales for next month, I can plan my resources or the production resources to ensure that demand is matched with the supply, which simply means I'm not running out of inventories. I have enough inventories on hand to match the future promotions, as well as I don't have too much inventories on hand so that we are keeping those excessive inventories and not making any profit. So from a supply chain viewpoint, an organization, a manufacturing retailer, or any firm wants to match the supply with demand, right? And we are focusing here on the demand end to produce right forecast so that we can optimize our operations. From here, let's look into some of the other terms which are associated with demand forecasting, especially master forecasting and functional forecasting. So master forecasting is the terminology that's primarily used to describe the forecasting at strategic level. So which means we are trying to plan for 2 to 5 years ahead. So that's why some of the activities you see in master forecasting are such as policy decisions. So understanding or forecasting what's the impact of certain policy decisions on the manufacturing operations, such as policies related to introduction of new technology, policies related to carbon footprint, sustainability, right? So what is the impact of these policies on my manufacturing operations, right? Similarly, product decisions, which markets should we enter into. Similar process decisions, the level of automation in the given process, right? What is the impact of opting new technology in the coming years on the manufacturing operations, right? Another good example here is plant decisions, opening new facilities in a given region. So companies don't just simply go and open plants into developing countries or the other countries. We need to understand what is the demand, what's the status of the different suppliers, how the economy is going to go in the coming years, what is the political situation. So they consider all this type of data when it comes to making these decisions. And one thing to remember, primarily in master forecasting, companies will rely on qualitative methods. So quantitative, or what we call hard analytics, is used at a minimal level. So we focus on expert judgments, right? Delphi method. So there are different methods, but we focus on qualitative techniques. The next level you can think of is the functional forecasting, which is more of intermediate to short range. The intermediate means up to 2 years. Short range, daily, weekly, monthly, and up to a quarter. So now if you look at some of the forecastings which will fit into at the function level or the intermediate or short term, are like market planning, looking into different product lines and deciding on promotions, right? So if you only explore this particular part, so when you're deciding on promotions, we need to tell our suppliers, but it impacts the entire supply chain. If you're not planning promotions properly, you don't have proper forecast, you will end up not having enough inventories to serve the customer, right? Similarly, if you overpredict for promotions, you will have too much inventory sitting but not doing any sales. Other examples are here, like for the production planning. You're deciding 1 year ahead the level of workers required, so which means you're forecasting for workers in order to do hiring or firing depending upon your aggregate planning strategy, right? I'll not go into details on this, but there are two planning strategies. One we call level, in which case your production output doesn't change, you produce at the same level. In this case, you will be forecasting how much inventories you have per month or per quarter based on your aggregate plan. Or you may be using a chase strategy. That's where you're planning to produce exactly same amount based on the demand forecast. purchase, your inventories won't vary too much, but you need to make sure you have right number of employees to match demand and supply. So which means forecasting number of people required. The point I'm trying to make here is the forecasting plays a key role. Either you're looking at strategic level or intermediate or short-term basis. So the next concept is of demand management. So this means including all the activities from the aggregate planning level to production planning to master scheduling to materials requirement planning. So in simple terms, you're trying to arrange the required number of workers, the raw material, and other machines, tools, and the production facilities in order to fulfill the demand from end customers. So that's the whole idea of demand management. So in a typical demand management process, the process always starts with a forecast. So for instance, again, going back to example of a retailer, so let's say we need to put some promotions during the Halloween, right? So I projected that we're going to sell a specific type of candies around 1,000 units, right? So based on this forecast, companies need to set the goal, the target they want to achieve, right? So once you set your goal, then I can start looking into planning, into the forecast. From forecast, you will know your goal, and from goal, you can do the planning. So which simply means aligning the resources in order to satisfy this goal, and this goal is kind of right, so it's much more accurate. Master forecasting or with a long range forecast, that's we're looking into very high level planning from 2 to 5 years. So primarily the qualitative methods used, right? So then at aggregate level or at the intermediate range, which goes maximum up to 2 years, some may only producing the aggregate plan for 1 year ahead. So that's where you're primarily looking into the workforce required, level of inventories required, as well as the machines required to satisfy the demand, right? But at aggregate level, not individual product family or individual product. Then further you break it down to the short range, which can go anywhere up to quarter, but I have seen in my experience short range plans being produced on monthly or weekly basis. I have seen the short range plans on daily basis too. So these short range plans are very essential in order to plan your materials on daily, weekly, or monthly basis, so that we can manage the inventories more closely. And when it comes to short range and medium range, we mainly focus on quantitative methods, so which means using numbers, right, on numerical information. So in this course, we're going to focus on some of the quantitative methods, which is moving average, exponential smoothing, and dealing with seasonality. So here's same explanation provided for the forecasting horizon, right? So we said 3 horizon: long range, intermediate range, and short range. So the horizon represents the length of time we want to predict in future. So next slide explains some of the forecasting principle. One thing you must remember that forecasts are always wrong, and in this particular course we will measure the forecasting accuracy by looking into forecast error. But if you can get your forecast right, which means if you can minimize the error, you can reduce the bullwhip effect. So which means you can better plan for your supply chain, but given that the information is shared among the supply chain partners, right?